Hello everyone and welcome to the latest Handyman in the field. Today we are having a very important discussion. Specifically, we've talked about a variety of different things, how to find jobs, what to do to make sure that you can land the job. But the most important probably thing that you need to know how to do is how to price your handyman jobs. There's a lot of different things that are going to be There's a lot of different advice, I should say. There's a lot of different advice on what you can and can't do, or what you should and shouldn't do, more specifically when it comes to how to price your stuff. It's going to be different for every single person. You may hear that somebody prices their stuff insanely high, and you may hear people who price their stuff really, really low. The reality is that you have to do what's right for you as an actual business owner. You need to know your numbers. You need to know how much money you actually need to make, because that's the important thing. Is if you need to support yourself, you've got your own personal rent, you've got a truck payment, you've got, utilities and groceries and all of that stuff that you need to have every single month. You have to have a good idea of what exactly you need to have every single month in order to make sure that you're being able to survive. Now, as a business owner, you're trying to obviously make money on top of that. You also have to worry about paying taxes, and you have to worry about paying your overhead when it comes to the business as well. All of that being said, you need to make sure that when you have all of that stuff, that you're pricing your stuff accordingly. There's a variety of different things that you can do, but specifically I want to talk about what I did in the very beginning. And it's not going to be the right way to do it. It's not the wrong way. It's going to be what worked for me in the very beginning. The important thing is that it's going to change, and you have to be open to change, because you have to adjust based off of how things go here to there. Specifically, early on, I had a very specific way of how I priced things, and it was based off of a $60 an hour rate. There was no rhyme or reason necessarily why I came up with $60. It had nothing to do with how much money I needed to make. It didn't have anything to do with that. There was three distinct reasons, and when I look back at it, I know how flawed this is, but I'm just going to tell you because I made a mistake and I learned from those mistakes, and hopefully I can prevent you from making the same mistake. When I started, my business, like I said, had two business partners. And my thought process was I wanted a number divisible by 3. So that if all 3 of us were working, we were all making a certain amount of money that was easy to divide amongst all of us. That was flawed, because the reality was, if I went and did a job by myself, I was getting paid $60 an hour. If I went and did a job with 2 other people, I was only getting paid $20 an hour. And yes, in the grand scheme of things, if you think about it, you're not working as much hypothetically as if you were if you were by yourself. But why should you make a third less? So like I said, it was extremely flawed. It did not make sense. And I also realized very quickly that I was underpricing compared to other people. The important thing is you have to, like I said, learn. You have to figure out what the best way to do it is. I tried to come up with a bunch of different ways of how I came up with my pricing when it came, like how to structure the pricing. So initially it was $60 an hour, and it was a complete guess on how long a job was going to take. The plus side is that in the beginning, I did that thing that everybody tells you not to do, which is tell people you are charging an hourly rate. And when I told people I was charging an hourly rate, then they just expected me to work for X amount of hours and pay that much times 60. That doesn't work for a business, and it doesn't work well for a lot of different reasons. But specifically, the reason it doesn't work is because you start to not factor in a lot of things. When you're in the very beginning, you're not factoring in insurance costs and how much that adds up. If you have my insurance that I had initially when I started my business was I had one payment that I had to make per year for the entire year for insurance. And that was basically, I just needed to make sure that I had that money. I think at the time, in the very beginning, I think it was something very low. It was like $1,300 for an entire year or something like that. At the time when I was paying $1,300, it was, okay, we need to have $1,300 to pay for the insurance, and that's what the money is. And I just need to make sure I get that much money by the time the insurance is due. that's not a great way to go, because it could take you a while, especially if you're still having to pay yourself and things like that. It's going to take you a while to get the money. The best thing that gets you to be where you need to be is, like I said, start with what you need. If your rent and your groceries and your utilities, if you have $2,000 of expenses every single month, then you need to make $2,000 minimum. You should be making more than that. You should be making at least, for most mortgage companies price their things like this. When you go to get a house, they're going to factor in the cost of the mortgage. They're going to factor in the cost of the taxes and the insurance for your house. They say that should not exceed, I believe it's like 30, maybe on the high end, 40% of your total income. So if you're married and your wife brings in $5,000 and you bring $5,000 in, then combined total, you shouldn't be having a mortgage that's more than $3,000 to $4,000 per month. Obviously, you could have car payments. You still have to have groceries. You could still have utilities. If you have kids, that's going to add more money into the rent, into the mix of what you need. So there's a lot of different factors that you have to think about, but the important thing is making sure that you're making enough money for yourself. So I'm just going to use round numbers for the sake of argument. Let's say you need to make $4,000 a month. Okay, so that $1,000 every single week. If you're planning on working every single week and you're planning on charging, let's say, before we figure out how much you're going to charge, you have to make $1,000. Now, you have to think about the fact that $1,000 that you're trying to make is not going to be the amount that you're making from, that's just what your take home is. If you have insurance, if you have the truck payment and things like that, obviously you need to make sure that you're making more. But I'm just, for the sake of argument, I'm trying to keep it to round numbers. So let's say you have to have $1,000 per week. If you have to have $1,000 per week and you're expecting to work, let's just say you were going to work 40 hours per week. It's probably not likely that you'll actually have 40 billable hours per week, but let's just say you did. For the sake of argument, let's make it even more. Let's say you were working 50 hours. You don't get paid overtime when you're a business owner, so let's say you were working 50 hours. So 50 hours per week and you've got to make $1,000. So all you have to do is make $20 an hour. Well, that seems simple enough, right? Well, it does until you factor in that you have to have your insurance covered. You have to have your monthly expenses covered, your supplies that you buy that aren't necessarily tacked on directly onto a job. You have to have your cell phone covered, your truck payment if that's part of the business. All those different things have to add in. So let's say on a given month, you have $1,000 of expenses of overhead for your software, your QuickBooks, all these different things that you have that help you run your business. You have $1,000 that you have to come up with to make sure your business stays afloat. Okay, so now you have to have another $250 every single week in addition to the $1,000 that you're paying yourself. In addition to that, I would estimate that you need to have at least another $300 to $400 for taxes. Now, you will not end up paying that much. Most of the time it's about 30%, but what I've learned is that if you structure your business in a way where you're keeping money to the side for taxes after every job, you'll end up having more than you need and you won't be in a predicament where you're owing a bunch of money. I started off in the beginning saving 30% of every job minus expenses. So if the job was $1,000 and there was $500 of expenses, specifically materials, I had, legitimate, even subcontracted labor and things. As long as you've got receipts showing that you paid a certain amount for things, then you can take that $500 and discount it because that's how the government's going to charge it. Your amount that you made off of that job was $500. So if you had a $500 and you needed to save about 30%, then you're down to $150 that you have to save out of that for taxes. And then everything else that you make is actually what would help you pay yourself and pay your overhead for your business. So you can see how it adds up very quickly. So don't start too small. One of the things I've heard, I've never done it myself, but one of the things I've heard while watching different videos and listening to podcasts and things like that is when you're starting out, do yourself a favor, call around to some other handyman companies, if there are any, and find out how much they charge. Find out how much they charge to come out and take care of something, and you'll get a general idea of how much their hourly rate is. If they say it's going to cost $100 to come out, chances are their hourly rate is somewhere in that neighborhood, because they're not coming out for an hour, and they're not coming out for something less than an hour. Some places have a minimum. I have a service minimum that I charge. Unless it's extremely local in my town, I charge $150. If it's extremely local, it's $120. And that's just because most of the time I'm driving around town anyway, so it's not like I have any associated fees. Now, going back to the very beginning, when I had the $60 an hour rate, there was different amounts that we had, where if we had a job that had a total price, I would factor into the job a price that associated with, if I had to go do an estimate, you got $30 for an estimate. That was the only other extra. And then basically whoever drove to the job also got a $30 travel fee or travel payment. Now, again, I'm not saying that was a good method, but that was the method that I started off with. And that method, ultimately, I had to figure out how to adjust it very quickly. Within, I think it was about a year, I still had the partners. I immediately jumped from $60 an hour to $90 an hour. And that was because of information that I had learned from, other people who were in the business, other people saying how much other people were charging. And I felt like that was still a reasonable amount of money that I could charge and not have people get too upset about. The thing is, as time progresses, you're going to gain more skills. And as you gain more skills and as you gain more wisdom and knowledge about running your business, you're going to realize that you need to raise your prices. But there's other reasons you would raise your prices too. You decide you're going to upgrade some of your equipment. I've had some people say, don't do a job that requires a specific type of equipment without building that into the cost. That isn't always going to work. If you've got to, I'm trying to give here's a good example. I don't do this, but if you did drain clogs, okay? If you had every different piece of equipment to actually take care of a variety of drain clogs. I'm not just talking about sink clogs or toilet clogs. I'm talking about mainline clogs or bathtub clogs. You have to have like the bigger equipment for the snakes, the drain snakes and things like that. I do some minor drain clogs, but I don't have the equipment to do large ones. And it's because I just don't have enough of that work. There are certain things where you can't expect someone to pay the cost of what the equipment is, because that doesn't make any sense. And personally, I don't think that's a great idea. Let's say someone asks you to power wash their driveway. You don't have a power washer. You could go to the store, and they do have power washers that'll cost you, $100, $150. They're not very good, but they'll work. It'll take you a long time, but you'll get it done. Now, the problem is that the same companies that already are out there that power wash, they could be charging $200, and they're going to take half as much time to do the entire driveway as it would you. Now, sometimes time is a concern when it comes to customers, but the timing has to do with the quality of the equipment that you have. If you have a more powerful power washer, you could probably do things a lot quicker, but that's going to cost you. So let's say you go buy a $500 power washer. You can't go to the very first customer that you have, for power washing and charge them $500 so that you can go buy the power washer. Not to mention, you're still not going to be making any money for yourself if all you're charging is the amount that you're charging for the equipment. So there's a lot of nuance when it comes to this. You have to figure out the best way to do things. What I've always told myself is, unless I know I'm not going to use the equipment more than once, I will assume the job will require, I will assume that I'll use the equipment more than once. Meaning, I might buy a rotary drill. I will use it. Am I going to use it all the time? No. Am I going to spend, $400 on a nice Milwaukee battery rotary drill? Yeah, I probably am. But as I am able to, take on more jobs, that piece of equipment will make me money back. And that's the big thing. So you have to think about it like that. Now, the other thing to consider is, while you will have an internal hourly rate, you cannot actually disclose your hourly rate to a customer. I guess you could choose to. This is my suggestion. Don't tell anybody what your hourly rate is. That's an internal company number that is not meant to be told to a customer who's, calling to looking for work. If a customer calls and asks you to take care of something and they say, what's your hourly rate? You say, I don't charge an hourly rate. I charge by the job. I will price the job according to how long we think it'll take, and I'll give you a flat rate price. There are times where that will bite you in the butt, but you will be more respected if you stick to your cost, your price that you give somebody more so than anything else. If somebody says, will you change a faucet? How much will it cost you to change a faucet? In your mind, you can gauge how long it's going to take based off of how often you've done it, how accustomed you are to doing the work. But then in addition to that, you can also think about the times where it didn't go well and how much extra time it took because of those things you had to do just to make sure that it worked. Sticking on that faucet, I've had times where I could get a faucet in and out in less than 30 minutes. And that's with the sink not even cleaned out underneath, which sucks when it happens, but it happens. Then there's other times where it's taken, upwards of 2 hours because I've got to figure out I've got to disassemble I got to unmount the garbage disposal just to be able to get back there. And then you get back there and find out that the bolt that was on there is rusted out and you're not gonna be able to do anything but cut it out. And if you've got to cut it out, then it's gonna take you even more time and more effort and all of that. And the thing is, you have to think about that's a possibility. Now, every scenario, the way I do my pricing is I typically try to give what I would assume could be the worst case scenario, but it's not actually the worst case scenario. Like for a faucet, I will typically tell somebody $180. That's not to say that it'll only take me about an hour and a half or just over an hour. It builds a little bit of extra time in there, but generally speaking, that's what I typically will be. Now, if I get there, I will always ask certain questions. You have to ask qualifying questions when you're getting information, especially if you're not going for an on-site estimate. You have to find out, is this a double sink? Is this a single sink? If it's double sink, you've got to factor in that there's going to be plumbing that's potentially going to get in the way with the drain lines. Is there a garbage disposal? Is there not a garbage disposal? Is the faucet itself, you have to think about the water shutoff valves. Are the shutoff valves going to work? If they don't work, do they know where their main water shutoff is to be able to turn it off? Because you're going to have to disconnect that in order to get the new faucet on. You have to think about those things. And the more you do certain jobs, the more you will think of those things and think about to ask those questions. Sometimes customers, they don't understand why you're asking certain questions, but it's basically because you've trialed and errored these specific jobs so many times that you've come up with a system on how to know exactly how much time it's going to take. If someone tells me I've got to take out a garbage disposal, I immediately will add $30 in. If someone tells me that the shutoff valves, if they turn them, it's still leaking water, I add another $60 in. And then I still tell them that there's a possibility that the shutoff valves may need to be replaced. And if that's the case, then that will add more cost. I try to factor that stuff in. I tell them, if the shutoff valves don't work, we need to have access to your main water shutoff. If they say it's in a crawl space that's hard to get to, you have to figure out how to get to it to be able to do the job. Otherwise, you're not going to get paid. If you shut them off, that would be the perfect opportunity to replace those shutoff valves. So if you're comfortable with doing shutoff valves for, underneath a sink, you can get more money for that. But I always tell customers ahead of time, it's $60 per shutoff valve. That includes the materials and the shutoff. I know that's probably cheap in comparison to a plumber, but it will allow me to get the job done, and it's not going to be too much more than what they're already paying. If they have to replace both shutoff valves, it's an extra $120 on top of the $180. That's $300 for a new faucet installed and new shutoff valves installed. In addition to that, they're going to have to buy the faucet. So they're still probably under $500 for a brand new faucet. That's the mentality of how I think when it comes to that. Toilets are another one. You replace a toilet, there are certain things that they are not thinking about, when they do it. A lot of people will have a shorter toilet and get a new toilet, which means the supply line is no longer going to be big enough, which means it needs a new supply line. You still have to worry about the shutoff valve for that, for that specific location too. So that's another thing you have to think about. Most toilets will come with a wax ring, and those are probably the crappiest ones that you'll ever see. I typically factor in the cost of a new supply line, a separate wax ring, and a set of bolts, because I prefer to use my own stuff that I know how to use, and it's quick and I don't have to worry about issues that arise. Then you find out what type of toilet it is. And in that situation, once you find out what toilet it is, you can generally gauge, if you've done enough toilets, you gauge how long it'll take you to put together a toilet. There are certain toilets, they fly. They go together very quickly. And I mean, I've done certain brands toilets in under 30 minutes, removing the old one, getting it completely out of the house, installing a brand new toilet, completely assembling it, getting it all set in one place in 30 minutes. It doesn't mean I'm going to charge 30 minutes of labor. I've gotten that fast because I've done it enough. I have the experience. I should not get charged. I should not get paid less than what a normal scenario would be. In most scenarios, I think I charge it's $265, which includes the materials, the few materials that I buy, which is like $15, $25, somewhere in that range of materials, not including the shutoff valve. That's assuming the shutoff valve works. Shutoff valve would be an extra $60. Now, again, everybody's going to have different prices based off of the area that you're in. If you're in an area that's more highly populated, you might have more competition, which means you have to adjust your prices to be more competitive to get that. As you get more established, you're going to realize you don't need to worry about being competitive, because there's other things that'll set you apart. If you get good reviews, if the customers refer you, you're going to get customers that are willing to pay what you want them to pay. That's not to say take advantage of that. By no means am I saying take advantage of that. I'm saying make it make sense when it comes to the work. There are times where I've had customers. I've said this before. I don't like painting, but I can paint, and I will paint if a customer pays me to paint. However, when I get paid to paint, I'm well aware that I'm charging probably more than a painter. However, if they wanted a painter, they would have asked for a painter. They don't want a painter. They're asking you because they trust the work that you do. So remember that. I had a customer earlier this year who asked me to paint her living room. I gave her a price. She was okay with the price. At the end of the job, she was asking me about some other work. When I gave her the price for the other work, she came back and said, I don't really want to pay that much to have someone just paint. I know how long she said she knew how long it would take, and because she knew how long it would take, it was too expensive for her. I get it. I understand, but that's not your ideal customer then. Your ideal customer is the one who wants to pay you what you're worth. Just because I choose to paint for a customer doesn't mean I should make less than if I was going and doing some electrical or plumbing or other, general repairs that I charge the higher amounts. I understand that painting is not necessarily an expensive or it's not a trade that its charge is very high. But the problem is you're not a painter. If you want painter prices, then you have to go to a painter. If you want somebody who is established and reliable and is going to show up on time and is going to show up clean and is going to get the work done in the time frame that you're promising it's going to get done, that's why they're paying you the money that you are asking them to get paid. So you have to remember that. I know it's very difficult in the beginning to settle. I certainly did it plenty of times where I took way less than I should have for certain things. But you end up kicking yourself. You end up realizing that, is it worth it to even do this? Early on, I think a lot of guys who are starting in the handyman trade, they will look at a job and say, well, I'm not going to pay that much, so I can't charge that much. You're not your ideal customer. You already have skills. You already have the ability to take care of some of this stuff that other people are paying you for. The people who are paying you don't have that ability. They're looking to pay somebody because they don't have the skills, they don't have the tools, they don't have the ability. That's how it goes. So just keep that in mind when you're coming up with your pricing. The other thing to keep in mind that I would say is that it has to change. You have to learn how to adjust your prices as time progresses. Every year you should sit down, especially when you're putting all of your numbers together for your accountant for taxes. You need to figure out how much money you made, how much profit. A lot of people will focus very heavily on revenue. While revenue is great, it is not the thing that actually matters when it comes to how you're getting paid, how much money your business is making, how you can grow your business. I think that there's a heavy focus a lot of times in a lot of different businesses where it's like, oh, I did $500,000 of revenue. That's great. How much profit did you make? Because if you walked away with paying yourself a salary of like $50,000 and your business is the exact same situation, you didn't make any investments into your business, meaning you didn't buy any new and more efficient tools or anything like that, then what do you really have to show? I mean, I could have a business that makes $100,000 and still have $50,000 salary and still make some profit. Am I making as much profit as the $500,000 person? I would hope that I'm making less, but I know that there's companies out there where they think about, I get a deck job that's $60,000 and the deck job is going to be, this is so great because I could just do a couple of these. Yeah, but how much money are you actually walking away with at the end of it? You know, deck jobs are great, but some decking materials can cost you an insane amount of money. If your business is making $500,000 and your expenses that you have just for job materials is, $400,000, you're not making that much money. I mean, it's great to brag that you have a $500,000 business, but you're not making that much money. I recently ran my numbers for the last couple of years, and outside of the anomaly of the 1 year after I bought my business partners out, I've had, not including what I pay myself, I've had roughly between 40 and 60% net profit every year. Now, once you take my amount out, it's still averaging between 10 and 20% net profit. I think that's pretty good. I'm content with that. My numbers for last year was just under $130,000 of revenue. I'm hoping to grow that, obviously, because I want to be able to have employees or subcontractors who are doing bigger projects, and I'm just helping manage those projects while I continue to do what I'm already doing. But the thing is, you have to think of it from the perspective of, what do you want your business to be? If you just want to be an owner-operator, make sure you're making enough money to pay yourself what you need to make. Nobody wants to, work for 40 years and be making a small amount of money just because this is a job that they like to do. It's nice to have a job that you enjoy, and it's nice to have a job that you can have the flexibility of the schedule and things like that. But what's more important is that you're not, burning yourself out for, little scraps. Don't accept the little scraps. The other thing that I would say is you cannot master this immediately. It's going to take time of learning exactly what your business needs and what you need and what makes sense within your area. It's very difficult to get started and immediately be charging over $100 an hour. It is. Because the problem is you haven't established yourself. No one is knowing how reliable you are. You have to get started somehow. So just keep that in mind, that you're going to find out more as you do more work. You're going to find out how long things take. You can gauge your pricing off of that. You can find out how much other companies are charging by just understanding the market and things like that. There's a lot of different things that you can do, but the important thing is that how you do them and what you learn from them and how you adjust your business and your business pricing is what's going to make a difference in the long run. So hopefully that's helpful. If you guys have questions about pricing, I'm more than happy to give more details on how to price certain things, but it is going to be very specific on your specific area. And a lot of times it's hard to gauge. Now, if you happen to be in the Chicagoland area, I could give you help with that, but that's the area that I'm in. It's going to be different. California is going to be different than Texas. Texas is going to be different than New York. New York is going to be different than Florida. Everywhere is different. So just keep that in mind, that while I'm talking about specific numbers, you have to think about what makes sense for you. You might not have to make $4,000 a month. You might only have to make $2,000 a month. That doesn't mean that you should purposefully lower the amount that you are bringing in for your business because you have that ability to, be able to be, well off with only $2,000. Just keep that stuff in mind. It's a big deal, and it can make or break a lot of companies. And I've heard a lot of bad horror stories of companies not understanding how to price things, especially because they just don't have the experience. and then they end up going under. And nobody wants to see anybody. I don't want to see anybody going under. I have competitors in my area where I'm not looking for them to go under at all. I'd love to be able to, throw some work somebody's way if it's not something that I do. I don't do any furniture assembly. I don't do a lot of, I'd say basic, but it's stuff that you have to start off doing. I don't do any landscaping. I'd love to be able to throw that stuff to other, contractors, but they also have to be experienced and have the same, they have to have the same quality of work that I have, and the quality of customer service that I give my customers in order for me to refer them. So with all of that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. I'll be sure to answer those. If you are so inclined, please subscribe. All of the pricing that I'm talking specifically about here correlates to my weekly series, This Week in the Field. That comes out on Mondays. Be sure to check that out. I give you detailed prices for all of the different jobs that I did for the week and give you an idea of what jobs I am doing over the course of the week. Because I think that sometimes people gauge what you're doing or how successful you are by just numbers. And I don't think it's just numbers. I think it's part of it is that you have business coming in, and sometimes business isn't coming in, and you have to be able to figure out how to weather those down times. And I think it's helpful if you learn that. So be sure to check out This Week in the Field. Those come out on Monday, and these videos, they come out every Thursday as we talk about different topics related to running a handyman business. Guys, thanks so much for watching. This is Dustin. We'll see you guys next time.